the Global Energy Leaders Podcast, episode 66.
Welcome to the Global Energy Leaders Podcast, powered by R Squared Global.
Welcome to the Global Energy Leaders Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Ray. So good to have you. And today we get into nuclear energy with Dr. Liu from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. That's rpi.edu for more information. We'll link to that in the show notes. Here's why. Dr. Liu comes on and says, you know what? I'm not sure if I'm pro or anti-nuclear because that's too big of an answer to give. And there's some pros and there's some cons, and there's a lot of things about nuclear that, she doesn't want to sweep under the rug, but she doesn't want to just wipe it away either. The other thing I took away from this conversation was how much nuclear exposure, radiation exposure rather, do you get from being a nuclear power plant? And so we get into that, and she gives actually some real numbers, and so it's quite fascinating. I hope you enjoy the discussion I had with Dr. Liu the other day. Without further ado, here is Dr. Emily Liu from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. Dr. Liu, thank you so much for coming on today. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing well. Well, I like to ask this question a lot. And so what got you into energy, and specifically nuclear energy? What was the attraction to that?
The real attraction was back when I was still undergrad in physics. So, physics gets really hard, gets really fundamental. And at certain point, I feel that I want to do something more applied. I want to see how energy has come out of physics. And I want to see the fundamentals behind atoms, how they actually will be beneficial to the mankind. So that brings me to the closest field to physics, which is nuclear engineering. We basically study the same physics between nuclear physics and nuclear engineering, or if you say quantum mechanics, they're all correlated. I mean, nuclear engineering is really the application side of everything that we have learned in physics. So that's my very basic motivation to get to this point.
Right. And now it's interesting because you said, where you kind of started at and where you ended up at, but nuclear is one of those subjects that's it seems that there's a lot of divided opinion. There's some people who are really pro-nuclear, and then on the other side, it's like, don't ever talk about nuclear. So did you kind of go through a transition period where you thought, well, nuclear is kind of dangerous, I don't want to be involved with it, and you had to be persuaded, or were you always pro-nuclear in that sense?
Even at this point, I don't know how should I make myself a statement that whether or not I'm pro-nuclear or anti-nuclear or whatever. As a researcher, basically, I'm very pro-nuclear technology. But when people talk about pro-nuclear, I know that most of them are looking forward to nuclear energy or the defense part or nuclear weapon per se, right? It's a very different issue. Nuclear technology, which is where my research and my focus is at, is really the application of the nucleus properties, which is everywhere. It's go beyond whatever you can imagine in the life, from anything like food reprocessing to anything that you could possibly utilize, including medical imaging, which most people could, at least get a hands-on experience. But for nuclear energy, on the other hand, I understand the problems. That's why I am also very conservative of saying pro or anti, because it really depends on the industry, which puts efforts into building the power plant, into safety, the regulators, and how the new energy distribution for the specific country, really. So a brief example is if a country which has absolutely no natural resources, we know there are countries like this, and nuclear energy is probably the only one that provides concentrated energy without loads or trucks or ships of coals, gas tanks, oil tanks to come in. That's the only way you can do it. You don't have land, you don't have natural resources. You have to go with that specific route. But there's always safety. It's the same for any other competitors. And there is a post-processing. And the post-processing is the one that I'm really for it. And I hope all the waste that could be processed instead of leave that problem to the next generations. So I don't know how to quantify myself.
Well, I mean, I think
I hope you get a sense.
right.
Yeah.
So let me kind of try to recap that, make sure I'm following along. What you're saying, I think, is that nuclear is a broad term, like a lot of things. Say energy. It means a lot of stuff.
Yes.
So nuclear could be used in a weapons context, or it could be used in an energy context. And then even inside the energy context, it could have a lot of different meanings. And so, from a starter standpoint, you don't want to say, "Hey, I'm pro-nuclear," because some people could think you could mean a weapons context. Well, luckily, I think for the purposes of this show, we can just keep it to the energy side of things. But even on the energy side of things, there is worries and fears about what could happen and some of the repercussions of that. Now, one of the things that you mentioned there, I'm curious. You talked about the post-processing. Could you break that down and where we're at with the post-processing technology today?
The post-processing technology is partially available already, but it takes a lot of money to build the post-processing plants. And there's not of research going on to actually to make it easier to post-process. It's a very complex process because it involves a lot of chemical separations. In addition to the traditional physics or engineering, you think about it. So it's a add-on cost to industry or to the government, whoever is putting the money there. That's why, I'm not sure if any governments want to put that much money to the current available price of nuclear energy to do the post-processing, even though the technology, as I mentioned, is already at least halfly available there. Like in 60s, 70s, scientists already have built the post-processing processes there.
One more follow-up here, just kind of on this. You mentioned governments and agencies. We've had several guests on the show that have talked about nuclear energy and its viability. And it seems to me, as a non-nuclear expert, but it seems to me that there's kind of a debate inside the industry over why nuclear costs so much. Now, some people seem to think that it's just simply because it's not cost-effective, rather, because natural gas prices and other things are so cheap right now. While other people seem to argue that maybe regulation and fear of potential meltdowns and stuff has drove the cost up to where it's not very economical. Because it's the other thing that seems to be a consensus is, no matter what side of that argument you come on, is that uranium is cheap and plentiful. So what do you think about the cost of nuclear right now?
You mean the cost, right?
Right.
Comparing with gas prices right now, I don't think it's economical, I have to say, because the major cost comes from two different factors. The first one is all the safety loops.
Right.
There are many, many more loops compared with like years ago, how to build a nuclear power plant. And there is passive, or active, if there's a man controlling there, or even if without person, there should be a passive controlling and all these things going on. And then on top of that is the regulations. The regulations do put a lot of hurdle in the actual price. And also the regulators have a final say. Even if the power plant has been built, they can still say you don't pass anything. So the whole project is terminated. At that point, the industry may have cost billions of dollars to build the whole thing. So, there's so many uncertainties involved there. It is obviously at this particular point, it doesn't look like very economical. For places like the U.S., there is an obvious reason.
Okay, so one of the things I think that's quite important is just to kind of sometimes step back with nuclear. We've had on several guests, and just to kind of give a broad foundation of nuclear, because I think of all the current energy sources out there, at least the most popular ones, nuclear is kind of maybe the most or the least understood, because it is kind of a broad topic, as we touched on earlier. Give us an overview about what is important about nuclear technology today, and why should listeners actually follow the nuclear industry?
So my point of talking about the broad importance of nuclear technology is because there is a lot of misconceptions about the term nuclear or the term radiation in general. Radiation is everywhere, whether or not you want to use it or you want to know about it, it's there. Like you have a natural radiation from sunlight, from the rocks, from anywhere that you're exposed to, even from coals. in coal rocks, there's a lot of uranium. You may or may not know it. So utilizing nuclear, the term in general, means that we're utilizing either the subatomic particles like nucleus or protons or neutrons, or we're using the nuclear reactions, which means that those subatomic particles are having some reactions to change their forms into different things. So, I mean, these techniques are really powerful, and many of us may have not noticed that they are everywhere. I just want to give you a few examples. The notable nuclear technologies could be reactors, of course, that's everybody know, and nuclear medicine, for example, the radiation therapy, nuclear weapons, and then there are small things like smoke detectors, gun sights, or some other bigger technologies like medical imaging, name a few, chest scan, X-ray scan, positron emission tomography, PET scan, magnetic resonance imaging, MRI. For most of you, if you have ever gone through any processes to try to see if you have tumors, you actually would know those important technologies. And there's food processing and agriculture. We use a very small radiation to actually preserve food. And there's industrial applications like radioactive tracers to find where or how everything is flowing. Road constructions, oil gas explorations, like there's a little bit radioactive material actually in the oil log. All these things, they are being widely used that nobody noticed or purposely don't want to know about. But I mean, the small amount of nuclear radiation or a small amount of technology that has been utilized everywhere is important. I want to give you an example, like even human being could possibly die from too much salt. That's the same thing for radiation. I mean, it's all about quantity. As long as you have a reasonable quantity, you're actually having a better life instead of a worse life. So that's the general statement I want to make for nuclear technology, how ubiquitous it is and how important it is, whether or not we like it. And it's already been here in nature. And our goal as scientists is try to make a full use of them instead of introducing more hazardous result.
Right. Now, you mentioned radiation a few times, and I think that's got to be the big fear for almost anyone when you think of nuclear is, and it's kind of hard to separate maybe for someone like myself who's not in the business. When you think of nuclear, you think of, watching a movie and there's a nuclear bomb going off. They start talking about the wind blowing this way and radiation poisoning and stuff like that. But you've kind of said that, well, radiation's here. We get it from the sun. So what are maybe the biggest misconceptions that you deal with on a daily basis about radiation as it pertains to nuclear energy?
Yeah. I mean, all the fear is really, like you said, is really coming from radiation. And radiation is all about quantity. I mean, there are different types of radiation, of course. I mean, you can come from X-rays, neutrons, and, gamma rays, all these, or even electrons, all these different things. But, I mean, in a big context, it's really about quantity. I mean, we get all the external radiation coming from cosmic rays. As long as you exist, you actually get them. And terrestrial gamma rays from rocks, and we get internal exposure, like you actually drink radioactive stuff every day because there's a very small amount of potassium-40, radium, carbon-14, or even tritium in water, a little bit every day, every moment. I mean, there's no way that we can separate the radiation from our life. Okay, so that's the biggest thing, biggest fear that I try to kind of relieve from everybody because it's here. I mean, it's just like you cannot resist. Okay, so I mean, when we do research and when we try to put safety on top of radiation or nuclear in general, is really to put the quantity there. So internationally, there is a dose limit for public, which is set on basis of a negligible risk of injury. And the only injury radiation eventually could lead you to from any possible radiation sources, for example, the bombs, if somehow we get it, it's cancer or genetic changes. So for this type of injury, when we set a basis of negligible risk, we assume any additional dose results in additional risk and put everything together. There's a standard, and all the industry that is related with radiation need to follow that standard for workers and for general public. So I don't think we really need to be panicked until there is something dramatic happens. Otherwise, in our own understanding, any nuclear-related fields are actually setting more strict standard compared with other fields to keep that dose limit to be under a very strict quantity.
Let me ask you this. Now, I'm not asking you to give me the numbers because this is kind of off the top of my head, but kind of break it down for the audience like this. Let's say right now it's a sunny day where I'm at. If I were to walk outside in this sunny day, or I would go to the dentist and get an X-ray of my tooth, I think that's when we think about radiation as just a normal consumer, you don't think about walking outside. But you do know when you go to the dentist and they put on the lead vest and the person they're not even going to stay in the room with you, and you're like, oh my gosh, what are you zapping my head with here? Because you're putting all this stuff in my head. And then so you've got outside. You said you're getting radiation there. We know we're getting radiation when we get on some level when we get an X-ray from the dentist. And then when you go to a nuclear plant, so how does that kind of weigh out? So walking in the sun compared to getting an X-ray compared to going to a plant, you don't have to give us the actual numbers per se, but just as far as...
Yeah, I do have some numbers that I could share with you. Yeah. So let me actually break down a few numbers. I use the unit called milliram, but don't worry about that too much because it's more a comparative number between different things that you go through. So cosmic rays. So for example, you reasonably go outside under sunshine, at your pleasant time. Of a whole year is probably 45 milliram that you get. And from rocks, you almost got like 60 milliram. Okay. And then from food and drinking and everything, you probably get 25 milliram. Those are natural. You cannot resist them.
And this is for a year, right?
Yes.
So you get more from rocks than we do from the sun on a yearly
basis. Oh,
yes.
Wow. Oh, yes. That's why I'm a big advertisement. No, I'm not advertising for them. But anyway, I always make people aware that radon gas is very, very dangerous. You really have to watch out for that. That's part of the problem from rocks.
But go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off there, but go ahead.
Yes, now man-made radiation. So medical X-rays, including dental, and we assume you get one chest scan and one dental every 1 or 2 years. And at yearly basis, you probably get 72.
So just a little bit more than the rock.
Yes, a little bit more than the rocks. And radiopharmaceuticals, if you try to get some kind of treatment going down, you get about 2, which is not really that much. And the nuclear power plant, if you are live next to, or you're actually the operators, you get 0.003 milliram per year.
So let me just recap, make sure I heard this right. So on a yearly basis, you are getting somewhere maybe 200 of those units on a yearly basis just by living. And if you live or work at a power, so the safest way to prevent nuclear radiation exposure is to actually work at the power plant and never be around rocks, is what you're telling me.
That's absolutely right. Yeah. We actually say working in nuclear power plant is much safer comparing with working as a miners, for example.
Right.
That's actually a dangerous field. Or if you are not so protected in medical field.
Right. Because you're
that's actually a big problem.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, this is fascinating. It's kind of one of those things where you're always wondering where exactly the truth lies, and then you kind of put it into like you said, what that number means to me isn't really relevant. It's just kind of the quantity relative to the other quantity, right? So that's a helpful way to think about it. What maybe, or let me ask you like this rather. Over the next 5 to 10 years, what do you think is going to happen with nuclear? Because it seems like right now there is a big push for people to kind of get the message out there about the truth about nuclear. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're, like you said, may not be pro-nuclear, But they're at least trying to get the message out there that this is really the safety that's with nuclear. Where do you think it's going in the next half to decade?
Yeah. For the next half a decade, two things I think will happen. The first thing is I think nuclear is always part of the energy landscape. I mean, I wouldn't say 100% or 0%. Somewhere in between, around 20-30% for most countries may be a reasonable number. Just because you cannot depend on all the solar energy, the panels are going to break. Wind, you may or may not have it. And then, gas, I mean, the price is going up and
Right.
down, and there is actually all the accidents and coals, all these issues. I mean, so as one part of the energy landscape, nuclear is always gonna be there. That's my first observation or my statement for the future.
Right.
And second one, to really survive in this new push of whatever push we have, the clean energy or safer energy or, recoverable or renewable,
Right.
or all the names. I think nuclear industry and scientists and governments really have to work together to find the safest way to address the issues, the waste management problem. I mean, I have to say, I do have some opinion with the industry that they don't want to put out money to do the waste management. And government also doesn't want to provide much funding to do that because for a big country like US, they claim there's enough land to do dry storage. I mean, it's something that I think we need to rethink the problem.
Right.
I really hope the very, very final product is just a very small chunk without any high radioactive material still left. We don't want to leave that to next generations, even though, yes, we do have enough land to bury them if we want to, because it's, again, a concentrated energy. It's not like you need mountains to do it. But
Right.
I do hope the management part for the waste could be gone in our generation. So
Well,
that's my second thing.
and I'm glad you brought that up because one of the things I think we've tried to do on this show is we brought on a wide range of opinions. We've had on nuclear. We haven't had on wind. I think we're trying to get on someone from wind, but we've had on, biofuels, hydro, oil, gas, solar. We've talked to a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds. And I think the one thing that if you listen to people who are thoughtful in the industry say is that X solution isn't the only solution. It's part of the solution. And I think,
Yes.
as far as when you turn on the news tonight, it's very politicized and it's very dogmatic on a stance. No matter where you come down on climate change or fossil fuels or any of that stuff, or solar or nuclear, no matter where you come down on any of this stuff, there is someone who is, it seems, 180 opposed to your position. And I think what you said it's something that needs to get out there is that, hey, we need to sit down as energy professionals and look and say, okay, where can nuclear play a role in the energy picture? And what it plays in the U.S. and what it plays in Africa and what it plays in China, those may be different, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But each energy source, as long as it's viable and it's economical and it's not just killing everything around it, well, let's sit down and figure out what piece of the puzzle that is, and let's maybe roll back some of this rhetoric and just have open discussions about it. And so I think you're right that nuclear right now in the next 5 years to 10 years, where it's going to fit in is going to be interesting to see. And I'm hoping that we can have more honest and open discussions and say, okay, this is what I like about nuclear. Here's its pros, and here's the things that we have to worry about. And that's fine with all resources. I'm not aware of a single energy resource right now that we can produce that doesn't have some impact on the environment.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. I mean, for example, that I do research in solar panels too. We actually do research in all the renewable energies
right.
too. But I do see their problems here and there. I mean, honestly, I don't put on my own roof the solar panels
Right.
yet because I'm not 100% sure how long they can last, whether or not they can last in the very brutal winter here. I mean, if I live in Texas where you are,
Right.
I may definitely do it, but not here in
Right.
upstate New York.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting. I mean, then when we discuss about this, I mean, there is always a different region where we locate, and then different country where our energy landscape is different.
No.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, I hope there's more honest discussion instead of being polarized about completely or 100% pro or anti something. I mean, I do see the problem of nuclear myself, and the same thing with our own scientific field. But I mean, we want to address, but I mean, there's all other limitations that we couldn't. That's why everybody needs to sit down and do this task together. I mean, the same thing with other energy choices.
Right. Well, I think that, that's hopefully what we can do on this show and other shows like this, that we can say, okay, hey, let's have honest discussion about this stuff. There's problems with all energy sources, no matter where you want to look at. They all present problems. And if you go to South Africa, out in the rural areas of South Africa where there's no power, I'm not necessarily sure what the best solution is for that area. It's probably not going out there to build a nuclear power plant. But it's probably not what it is, right? Is it a microgrid technology? Is it a wind farm? I don't know, but let's sit down and talk about it. And there's drawbacks. So no matter what we do, there's going to be something. And so, I agree. I think that's it's helpful to get out there and have these types of discussions. Before I let you go, tell us a little bit about y'all's programs that you have where you're at, and if someone wanted to maybe learn more or maybe potentially take some classes, what should they do?
We offer nuclear engineering and engineering physics program here at RPI, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. And we have, how many faculty we have? About 9 or 10 tenure track, and then a few teaching faculty here. We're in a big department in mechanical, aerospace, and nuclear engineering department together. We have around 30 undergrads every year in each class. So in total, it's about times 4. So it's 120 undergraduate students and about 40, 50 graduate students here as PhD candidates. We're a very active program. Everybody is working toward certain research areas, and we have a lot of expertise in power, as well as fields like nuclear materials, like safety controls, like some chemistry and some nuclear imaging related different fields. And if you guys want to know more, and feel free to Google our program, Nuclear Engineering and Engineering Physics program at RPI. And I do have my websites there. I think I can share with you, but it's also very easy to find my website through Google.
Yeah, well, we will link to that in the show notes, so anyone that wants to go can go check that out. So be sure to check out the show notes at globalenergymedia.com. And one final thing, you're right outside of Albany, and I've never been to New York, but what I hear is when you get to the Albany type area, that's where New York really shines as far as beautiful landscape and countryside.
Yes, you're absolutely right. We're near Adirondack Mountains, and we have a lot of ski resorts nearby, and we have Lake George National Park, and it's a beautiful area. It's not the same as New York City. So we always treat New York City as a city people, and ours is in countryside.
Right, I understand.
So it's not a traditional New York that you could imagine. And people here are very nice and kind of slower paced, but our students study very hard. And I do want to share with you more, and some of the information, including part of the topics where I tried to talk about today, was in one of my classes, which is called Nuclear Phenomena for Engineering Applications. I really love that class, and I gave a lot of students from very different fields this class, and they enjoyed it tremendously and solved their misconceptions about nuclear, about radiation, and they become more aware what's going on around them instead of just blindly think everything is safe or everything is unsafe.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah, I mean, so it's more about just get to know what is going on about radiation and nuclear. So,
well, good deal. RPI.edu is the main website there for the college. And we will link to everything else in the show notes. Thank you, Dr. Liu, so much for coming on. I really enjoyed this discussion, and we always enjoy when we can get people on and just have good, honest feedback about what's going on in their industry. And so best of luck to you and the university up there with continued success in educating people about nuclear energy.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Liu, thanks again for coming on. And if you're interested, we will link to her website and everything else in the show notes so that you can find out more about what they have going on up there in Albany. I think it's actually Troy, New York, just right outside of Albany. If you're interested, you can take some classes or maybe go pay them a visit sometime if you're in that area. The Global Energy Leaders Podcast is produced by Michael Sims and Chris Prine. Chris Prine also serves as editor for the Global Energy Leaders Podcast. Until next time, keep climbing.
Thanks for listening to the Global Energy Leaders Podcast, powered by R Squared Global.